Okay. Well, welcome, Ed. You have a large audience excited to hear from you. Today you're in company you can relax in. We're all technologists, we're all privacy enthusiasts, and actually we're all builders. So today the conversation we'd like to focus on is builder specific. How do we do what we love to do, work on the missions that drive us, but in a way that's safe, in a way that doesn't involve us, for example, taking the very, very big and brave steps that you have taken. So looking for your insights here. In terms of format, we had about 45 minutes with you, but please let us know if that's an issue. And the first, I'll let you do some intro comments, and then Jared and I will do about 30 minutes of Q&A. And then we'll have 15 minutes from the audience. So if you have any questions, please start preparing them. And passing it over to you, Ed, but we have to wait 3 seconds.
Okay, I think that was 3 seconds. Hopefully everybody can hear. So look, I had some remarks, but I think we'll cut it short because we've started late. The main thing here is think about the fact that this exists right now, that you guys have gathered here today. You're in, I think, Bogotá, right, which is not classically what we would think the center of the cryptoverse and the new alliances would be formed. But it's happening. Pre-2013, that was really hard to imagine. Just a mass consciousness wasn't really there. As you said, you guys are technologists. You were builders, you're hackers, you're putting this all together. So yeah, you were one of the average person. You understood these technologies, you used them, it's all you. Probably had a good comprehension of the threats, at least that theoretically existed, right? You were the ones that practically security attacks that you could personally touch. You would see all kinds of things like we had privacy tools like Tor back pre-2013. And they worked great, but you also read it. Papers, you saw things that like people were running hostile kernels, malicious kernels, trying to like sniff email, stuff. Because a lot of email was not happening like these regulations, like plain POP protocols, and you could just pull all of these things. There was a lot of web traffic and search traffic that was unencrypted.
Really changed. It's become much more really changed. It's
much more really changed. That joins the chat. Or joining the channel. And it's not a bad feedback, so let's do with that. Yeah, the idea in the briefest sense, what was it's harder now just to hunch on the background. So watch everything that passes, gather it all up, read everything, exploit everything, do what you want, because we've got this layer of encryption. Does that mean you're safe? Does that mean you probably solve? Obviously not. I mean, you guys have seen the threats to the ecosystem we're facing are increasingly commercial. And it's this nexus between the two things, sort of axes of power, institutional, governmental, and commercial, and how they intersect. They've created, unfortunately, an exploitative economy. This is more than just data mining. This is more than just like the NSO group in Israel and all of their competitors around the world. This is more than the governments and their intelligence agencies. And this is more than just like the bad legacy rough that we've inherited from these design and protocols that were designed, and networks that were designed in the 70s and 80s. It's more than the sum of its parts. What we have now is an awareness that the network that we're riding on is vulnerable, that the system is flawed, and that people are suffering real consequences as a result. And the fact that this needs to be fixed. And you guys, as a class, right, as a professional class, but also as a social class and activist class, are being personally targeted for your work on privacy. And that's something that I think the next question. be discussing about. But with all the preamble out of the way, I want to say that there's a lot of reason for cynicism. When you look at the world today, there are a lot of stories that make virtually sort of doubt the quality of human character and frustrating our condition naturally. At the same time, there are things like this event that it shows that within our tribe, our wider community, there are always going to be people setting fires, and there are always going to be people fighting fires. And the fact that we're here with firefighters today gives me hope that we can put them out. That's something good.
Cool. Thank you, Snowden. It's been nearly a decade since the Snowden revelations. What have been some of the outcomes or actions taken since that have made your actions worth it? What gives you hope?
Frankly, hostile, privacy hostile industries, like operating systems, become more privacy conscious and more privacy effective. Certainly, business security, which is not privacy, but they are certainly. But the fact that, Android, which was considered second word, become much better, much more difficult starting next week. That's impressive. The fact that it's spinal, like so privacy, not a hostile effect, it's sort of built all of these hooks into different people's services, families, and average people. They have no way out of that. It's just like protect themselves. That's bad.
To address. But when you look at just 2013,
The US infrastructure bill and the unprecedented move to sanction open source technology in the Tornado Cash case marks the beginning of a new crypto war. Would you agree? What should we expect, and how can we best protect ourselves while we advance the technology?
I'm not sure that it's actually the beginning of a new crypto, more than breaking infinity's one breaking the surface. We have been in the second crypto since 2013. When you have seen, for example, major companies like Apple talking about and discussing and building tools for addressing end-to-end encryption, so for example, all of the things that you back up to your iCloud, they no longer simply be delivered over to the government with keys, as is often the case today. You see that they won't do it. And the reason that they won't do it is they go and they talk to the government because they're afraid of some kind of backlash. The government says, you can't do this shit. Provide some sort of mechanisms, some levers, way for us to crack back into these phones, secure regular compliance or standard thing. And this, of course, was where in the last year or so, we had this idea of moving to on-device scanning on iOS against internationals. There are all kinds of arguments in favor and against, but the idea is this is something fundamentally different, something fundamentally new that we had never done before. Where Apple would work in concert with governmental, quasi-governmental organizations to compile a bad list, push this down to the end of the device you bought, you paid for, you own, but they no longer work for you. No longer answer to you. Instead, they're sort of scanning the contents of the device, tabulating and calculating the scores. Well, here's one bad hash, maybe we won't do anything with it. Then there's 25 bad hashes, we've got to send alerts. This organization, if it's not government directly, it partners directly with government. It just has this sort of this is always justified on the basis of protecting children, terrorism, sort of unobjectionable stuff for the mass market. But we know the consequences. And now you see this being spread in a way that in the post-9/11 moment was very common, but I think partially simmered down in public imagination which was finance. Right? And we never had this level of intrusion into the financial sector before 9/11. Banks' records were their records, and governments could go and get them. Suspicious activities of courts, and customer laws, monetary measures. None of these really existed until the period of the They all came in personally. And governments largely were satisfied with that. But now,
Sorry, if I can jump in here, Ed. I think I think if we could kind of expand the question to something that we will face as we move forward, this tension that you talk about, right? The builders in this room, they're not going to stop what they're doing. At the same time, people in government have, a job to do. And this tension will continue to exist and perhaps escalate even more. So I think one question that we have as builders here, being pragmatic and practical, is do you think it is possible to shift the conversation into one that's more collaborative, one in which we can be partners? I see people in government, the regulators, as individuals too, and I think the important thing is for both sides to not see each other as enemies, but to try and see if we can all build the future we want to live in, all of us. So my question to you is, do you see this happening? Do you have too much cynicism for this? I do remember in some of your conversations you talk about having done what you did because you're an optimist, not a pessimist. So if you can talk to that.
yeah, I mean, it's a great question. The problem is, I have looked at it from an optimistic perspective. People have called me naive for years, several criticisms, because I believe things can be better. At the same time, we're all paying attention to all where we all see the direction of the world. We are not currently heading in the direction of the global renaissance for society. We are barreling very well towards a darker, more authoritarian future. When you look, for example, in the United States, because
has the most policy influence over the rest of the world, particularly when we talk about things like finance and law enforcement, because they apply extraterritoriality to their sort of policies through things like sanctions and the long arm sort of jurisdiction. When you look at Democrats, when you look at Republicans on these issues, there is a bipartisan consensus in favor of authoritarianism and greater authoritarian policies. The idea that we have a limited government, the idea that there are certain things the government cannot do is really not embraced. Instead, we have people will go, well, the way government does this, should be a little bit more procedural on this side, and it should be a little bit more strict on this side. But the idea that they simply can't do that, or they shouldn't do that, or that's not a role for them to embrace, is a minority view. We have actually seen some encouraging steps here. For example, the Bitcoin people that are working like in Texas, they are beginning to capture some of the membership of Congress. And that's actually a tremendously positive thing, even if they never pass a bill, because simply passing no bill is better than passing bad bills. When you talk about things like the U.S. infrastructure bill, which was cited earlier, I haven't followed this closely, but the idea here is you've got a lot of sort of lobbying groups backed by traditional finance, right? Who see what I was getting into in the last answer, a threat to their sort of hegemony in the classic system, because now a parallel economy is rising in the digital space that uses its own tokens, it uses its own currencies, and it doesn't require sort of direct, tight links with the legacy system. And they go, well, how do we capture that? How do we influence that? Why don't we pass bills to try to make them subject, these new young upstarts, to the same kind of regulatory capture that we ourselves in our industry is burdened by? The thing is, when we do that, what we're building is a monolith of control, right? This is the old, like, sort of panopticon thing. You have a central tower that all of the sort of residents who surround it have to answer to. This is like, we have to remember, this is a legacy construct. It does not have to be this way. It is not necessarily better this way. It is simply the way that it is. Should we depart from this? Should we construct something new? That's the open question. That's what your work should be. Now, as you said, as you are builders, and you see this monolith waking up, you see it turning its gaze towards you. What do you do? And I think this is a core question. It's a very difficult one. When we talk about something like Tornado Cash, there was nothing wrong with Tornado Cash legally. There's very clearly, in my opinion, nothing wrong with Tornado Cash constitutionally. And we can discuss this in length later. But the basic idea is that somebody published a smart contract on the blockchain. Other people use the smart contract. And now, years later, months later, whatever, you have governments being pressured, certainly by the United States government, right? You're not going to see a country like the Netherlands waking up one day and go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to shatter the crypto economy. We're going to go after smart contracts. No, like they just simply do not have that level of sophistication. They do not have that level of staffing. They do not have that level of policy advisors. What you see is the U.S. government in their intelligence sector starting to go, oh, well, we think, North Korea or whoever used this thing. We don't like this thing. We haven't been able to act against it independently. How can we send a message? How can we put a head on the pike? How can we, even if what they're doing is lawful, how can we get them some way peripherally through a partner or whatever, where we'll scare everyone in the space not to try this same thing? Not to replicate it, not to fork it, not to do whatever, not to popularize it, because that's what they're really worried about. They're worried about the success of a parallel economy disrupting and eventually supplanting their traditional economy, because they're comfortable with the level of control that they've developed in the one, and they're not comfortable with the level of privilege they've been granted in the other. So when you ask, what should you be doing? Unfortunately, it's a question of threat modeling. The problem, the core mistake with the Tornado Cash project from the development perspective is they thought the law mattered. They thought what they did, as long as they played by the rules, as long as they did this carefully, could be done in the open, and they'd be okay. The problem is the law can be reinterpreted post facto. The law can be twisted, and the law certainly will be abused and has, been abused as long as we've had laws. So I think the question that people who are working on this kind of development need to think about is just how disruptive is the tool that you're creating going to be? And I think the second question is, if anybody could prove who Satoshi Nakamoto was, and, if they were still alive, would they be in jail? Would they still be able to act freely? Or would they have to die or disappear? And I think that's one of the incredible lessons from this space, is the most successful project that we've ever had here, the most disruptive project that we've ever had here, is from an anonymous developer who disappeared, melted away. We don't know why. Was it a health problem? Or was it someone who simply understood, even if you have, $1 billion, $10 billion, whatever, is it worth the consequences? Do you have enough? Have you contributed enough? And will the project survive without you? Are you doing this for yourself? Are you doing this for the...
Sorry. So it sounds like you are less optimistic about our abilities going forward to collaborate, as has been evidenced by recent events. Would you agree with that? Less optimistic?
I think the question is, when you talk about, can we be on the same side of government? Can we collaborate with government? What is government? Who is the government? Is the government on your side? Do they want to be on your side? What are their goals? What are your goals? In order to collaborate with government, I think we have to change government, because right now, government is hostile to the ideals of a free and open ecosystem, a free and open economy, frankly, a free and open society. They want it to be free-ish, open-ish, but they're not actually committed to the principles.
Ex-NSA chief Michael Hayden has been quoted, "We kill people based on metadata." What design decisions in current generation private instant messengers concern you? How could they be improved? What would you like to see in an ideal private communication tool?
Yeah, so the worst case here, which is shameful because it's a tremendously valuable tool, of course, is Signal, right? And everyone in the audience is familiar with it. It's really a best-in-class private messenger. I use it myself. But for the average person who can't just, mint fake phone numbers, tying your account to a real world identity is it's a dangerous flaw. If they arrest not even you, but a peer, and they find, your number in a sort of contact address book, and then they see it in the person's Signal message history, even if you got disappearing messages on, now they're interested in it. Now they will look up that phone number. They'll go, where else do we see this? Is it in our country? Is it active in our regions? Where are the movements? Where are the associations of that number? And just with the phone number, today you can learn everything about someone's life if it's their real phone number, because it's connected to your movements through your phone. It's connected to your purchases. It's connected to your cellular plan, which is your payments. They can then go to the telecommunications provider. They can get all of your history. If you're using a VPN or something like that, they can simply go from the telecoms provider and go, they're connecting to this VPN. Can we either requisition the records from that VPN, or can we hack that VPN? Can we sort of arrest them, lean on them? Having any kind of activity records that can be easily correlated with identity is a fundamental flaw. And we understand this now. And I think this leads into this idea of like privacy and anonymity. What do we really need? Where does it go? Where is the system falling down? Where is it failing us? Because right now it's very difficult to either live a private life or much less an anonymous one.
Thank you. Thanks, Edward. I think we've all been waiting for Signal to launch their numberless account system for a long time. So Signal, please.
Or just use status.
Or use status.
Yeah, but I mean, when we talk in this kind of audience, that's a great point. Like, if Signal fails to fix their system, do better, outcompete them. That's an opening. And, it's not like a bad thing. It's not saying anything bad about Signal. It's saying, look, if somebody else can do better, they should do better. And as a consequence, the world will benefit.
Thank you. I wanted to zoom out a little bit. We've been talking about a specific tool, a messaging tool. Frankly, I think a lot of people listening in and in the audience, I think we're inspired to do what they do, to dedicate their careers to building privacy tools because of your revelations and how it inspired a sense of urgency, right? Like, if some people have been aware of privacy issues, your revelations made it more urgent for them. So I'm guessing that you would prefer to be here side by side with them building tools. If you had like a dream organization, what would it look like, and what kind of tools would you build outside of messaging?
I think it misunderstands me as a person, because I would love to be able to contribute to all of these things, but I don't have that level of personal ambition. When I came forward, it wasn't to tell the world how to live. It wasn't to say this is right and wrong. It wasn't to say let's sort of reconstruct the internet in line with how I imagine it to be. I just wanted people to understand what was going on so that they could decide. It's completely forgotten history at this point. There was a documentary by Laura Poitras called Citizen 4. Many of you may have seen it. That was in the hotel room with me on camera. But another handle that I used when contacting the journalists, I think at least Glenn Greenwald, was Cincinnatus. And Cincinnatus was a figure in Roman history who made a significant contribution, shall we say, to the Republic. And then when they had the opportunity to use their fame, to use their sort of glory, to become dictator, they walked away from it and went back to their farm. And that's my personal interest, right? I didn't want to be the face of this. I don't want to be sort of the person going to all of these conferences. it's a pleasure, and I'm glad to be with you guys. But the idea is I want you guys to make me unnecessary. And I think you've been doing that pretty well, right? I actually have less presence now than I have in years prior. And that's because I'm not the greatest expert. I'm not the greatest builder. I understand how the system of mass surveillance works because I worked with it personally, right, at the desk. But we've talked about it for so long. You guys, even if you didn't work with it, you understand the same connections. Many of you have greater expertise than me. I can share my insight. I can share my thinking. I can share sort of my moral judgment, my values, and how I assess the problem. But the idea that like I want to go in and make the privacy tool and fix all of these things and write the laws, I think I've done enough there, right? If anything, I've done too much there. And I don't want my influence to sort of crowd out other and possibly better voices.
Thank you. Earlier, you talked about collaboration is only possible when a government inside has been changed. I wanted to talk about what I consider a timeline mismatch. So there's often a trade-off between, people might debate this, but there's oftentimes a trade-off between security and privacy. And the timeline mismatch is that with security violations, the effects of these violations are immediate and they're very extreme, they're very visible. The problem with privacy violations is that these effects are very slow burning and they're often not directly attributable to one factor. So then, if I were a career bureaucrat, politician, somebody who worked at the NSA, I also have these trade-offs to make. If I want to step ahead in my career, if I want to get rewarded for the things that I'm doing today and the results that I achieve, then it makes sense to focus on security rather than privacy. So I wonder if you have any opinions on how we can realign incentives to affect the internal change that you talk about.
Yeah. We have to get rid of the classification system and allow governance to happen in plain sight. That's not likely to happen, of course. But when we look at how you framed that, I think it's largely correct. The best analogy that I've seen is that the data collection problem is very much like pollution, right? We don't see the harms for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And by the time that we do, we are so poisoned by it that it is very difficult to heal the problem that we're facing. And how do governments respond in that kind of thing? Well, they go, it was before my time. These decisions were made half a decade ago. These decisions were made 12 decades ago, whatever. It's ancient history. It's archaeology. Worst case, they throw somebody under the bus. They fire them. They write a scandal. But realistically, it almost never implicates current serving officials. And that's not an accident. That's by design. That is why these policies happen in secret. This is why when you see even commercial entities doing this, Google or Facebook, they do it quietly. They do it as secretly as they can. And when it does happen, they say, oh, we shut down that program. Oh, we did whatever. And they start up a similar effort under a different name, slightly different branding, slightly more narrow goals, when the attention moves on, because we have civilizationally no attention span for anything that's complex. When you talk about like security failures, we're talking about, bombings or whatever. Even that, after 3 weeks, it's ancient history. And ask yourself, think about the absolute worst intelligence failure of your lifetime that you can remember. And then ask yourself, how many intelligence officials were fired as a result? Who went to jail, right? Who had to resign? Who, fell on the sword for this? And the answer, of course, is nobody. It never happens. That's not how it works. Accountability is not intended for the government. Accountability is intended for the public in this new model. This is the inversion and the core flaw of the system as we've constructed it today. And as you said, how do we change this? Well, we've got to invert those incentives. We have to return to the traditional model where we have private citizens and we have public officials. This is also, how do you make the government someone that you can collaborate with? You have to expose their details. You have to make them feel the pain of these systems. They have to see how this ecosystem, this economy that's sort of focused on data collection and mass surveillance affects them too. Because right now they're insulated by it. And you actually see a pushback from this from major media institutions, where like in the 2016 thing, where you've got a presidential candidate who has their emails leaked. Massive privacy violation, right? Yeah, sure. At the same time, this is the consequence that everyone else in the country feels every single day, right? Google's going through your emails all day long. They're not necessarily publishing them. But we live open lives. We're forced to live electronically naked. At the same time, the people who are in positions of institutional authority are very much insulated from the consequences of the policies that they create. If we change that, if we make them start feeling, where these systems go wrong, how dangerous they are, how harmful they are, and we show them alternatives, we show the positive vision of the world as it could be, they become more open, more amenable to that kind of change, I think. So when the scandals get worse, I think life will get better.
You partially answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. In your book, Permanent Record, you described the internet we used to know, one that was creative and cooperative, a culture that could produce more truth. Do you think we can return to it? Is there any salvation for the internet or advanced governments today? And if so, what reforms or changes would we need to achieve it?
It's a very interesting question. I think when you look back at the internet as it was, as many of us might remember, at least the older among us. Now I'm one of the old ones, right? But fortunately, there are still people with more experience than me. We've got a live mic somewhere that's feeding into me. Sorry, can we mute that mic? Thanks. Yeah, so we have. Now we've got feedback. Sorry, I lost the question. How do we return to that? Right. The idea is we had a different culture on the internet back then because we had a different cohort on the internet back then. The only people who were using the internet were those who had kind of traversed a gate of pain. You really had to be there. You really had to commit to it. It was hard to use. It was expensive. It was noisy. Like you really had to sacrifice something. So everyone that was there badly wanted to be there. Now we have an involuntary internet where you have to be there. You have to have some kind of presence just to participate in the economy, right? To apply for a job, to get invited to a party. To order your groceries now that our physical movements are often prescribed where we can travel because of pandemic measures and things like that. More and more of our lives is being mediated through this network that people have been pushed into, right? And so now you have truly the mass of humanity, many of whom are just there because they have no choice, right? It's not the kind of public commons that we have to keep up, but more they see it as like sort of a private space that they have no responsibility for upkeeping, for improving. So now we're suffering from a tragedy of the commons. I think as we move to new models of connection that have more of a sense of ownership, right? This is their room, their home, their network, their graph, their connection, whatever, where they are the ones who are curating and connecting and messaging. Within these spaces, we see people still feel a pretty strong sense of ownership. And this even goes to things like, Twitter. When somebody loses their Twitter account, they really feel aggrieved. They fly off the handle, right? They're trying to set up their own websites to compete just to get back on the wheel. That's one service. But the idea here is when you are a pioneer, you share in a sense of ownership. When you go to the mall, you don't really feel like you have to clean up after yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a great answer. I think we'll open to the audience for questions. Can somebody help with that?
Sure. While we get those questions, there's one more thing that I wanted to get to. It was a topic.
So
that
we're all here because we care about privacy, but how do we persuade the average user to care about privacy and eventually demand application developers, infrastructure providers, and elected officials to care about privacy too?
Again, I think there's a tight loop to consequences. If people don't have to care about privacy, they won't care about privacy. We have already, unfortunately, begin to see the tip of the iceberg of the privacy problem. But the rest of it is rising. And I think the next decades, if we don't solve it before then, it's going to be a real catastrophe. We have not seen any of these systems abused maximally. Some of that is fearfulness, some like worries about blowback. Some of this is legislative, but really it's a will to power problem. Like it's somewhat analogous to nuclear arms. They have a red button that's there theoretically. They understood it could be done. Actually, this is before the invention of atomic weapons. They understand that they could split the atom in a way that's not used for power generation, but for directed energy application. And they're not using it because of the consequences, right? They worry, what will happen when other people do it? Eventually, somebody will get froggy and hit that button. I mean, I don't just mean this in like a cyber attack thing. This can also happen corporately. Right now, they feel like they see scandals about Facebook. They worry about their stock price. But as we move into a more fragmented, more authoritarian world, a more fragmented economy, you're going to see national champions in these different countries that start to flex their muscles for national benefit. And the other side of the equation is balanced by the global consequence. And so I think that's largely a matter of time. The brief answer is, as I said, if you want people to care about privacy, they have to see the consequences. Right now, they don't, like pollution, and will be poisoned. Like with climate, things will get hotter, weather will get more extreme. But when we look down the road, as things get worse, the desire for solutions will become natural. There's one more thing that I want to follow up on this, which is just one of the topics that I was writing my remarks for earlier, was this idea about sort of privacy and anonymity. Which one matters more? Which one should come first, right? If we have to pick between one or the other. And I think it's a mistake that we can pick and choose. When you think about what they are, what is privacy? I've given all of the things about like human rights. And privacy is where rights derive from. It's the power of the individual, all these things, the protected space for you. But what does that actually mean in a practical sense? Well, privacy is a cover for your activity. All those things we talked about with metadata, where you go, who you talk to, what you buy, who you're with when you wake up, when you go to sleep. It's a delegable control over disclosure. You can tell other people about this, but no one can know about that without you telling them first. Anonymity, on the other hand, is a cover for identity. Someone can see you driving through town. They don't know who you are. They just see a car from far away. They don't see the plates, observe it, but they know a car went from point A to point B. Losing that link, or rather establishing that link between action or activity and identity, is where the problems really arise. It's hard to maintain either. I think it's a mistake to focus on privacy as the product of confidentiality, at least the product of confidentiality alone, such as in the context of like business relationships. And when you guys are thinking about establishing businesses, this is important. If Google holds your inbox, but it doesn't share it with others, they say we have policies against that. It's not true, but imagine, for the sake of argument, that it were true. Does that make your inbox private? No. because even if they didn't choose, if Google didn't choose for more than 10 minutes to keep the whole all of their sort of algorithms out of your inbox, they could go into it. They could read your inbox. They could share your inbox, even if they didn't choose to. Now, that inbox may be more private than, if you just took everything and laid it out on the road outside your house, plastered the facade with it, printed it on your T-shirt. But that doesn't make it private because you've lost control over it. Now, that control that should be yours to assign is now assigned by other entities. And I think that's what's at the heart of privacy. And this is what's missed, and people don't like it because it's strong language. But there is control there, not control over others, which is what we call violence or Google or government, right? But control over yourself, control over the things that belong to you. And if this ever seems abstract or obscure, you got to remember that the basic idea is encoded in our language. The private moment, the private thought, private property. Now, for as long as the world has had violent men within it, women have known that the real test of privacy is whether a thing can be kept private from someone in a relationship of unequal power with you. Like the best password in the world can't keep a phone locked against coercion or compulsion, against the raised fist and sort of the snarled demand. Yet that same guy can be thwarted. He'll never find his way into a $10 Nokia with no security, no PIN code, no lock, whatever, that she keeps at the office because he doesn't know that it exists. That kind of anonymity in this case of device, right? Really the function of anonymity as opposed to that it's hers or whatever. Is what's protective here, whether it's a hidden device or a hidden app or a partition or a VPN or a number or an account or something else entirely. The principle is the same. Systems that fail to guarantee your privacy, your control over your inner world by leveraging anonymity, breaking this identity link, which is to say breaking the links of action and actor or object and owner. They aren't really solving a privacy problem. They're just externalizing the costs of the privacy problem onto someone else, onto the person in the unequal relationship. Now, just to follow the analogy to its full conclusion, right? I don't want to be speaking to half of the audience here. Some of the guys in the room might not feel any immediate resonance in the example of a big dude demanding you unlock your phone. But that's actually the very same relationship that you have with your government. It doesn't matter that you're, a 10th degree pink belt in brojitsu, and you've got laser vision, and you take your creatine. When the big guy wants to get what you have, and you don't cooperate, you're going to get thumped. Just the same. You're not going to fix the problem with more violence, right? You're not going to fix the problem with push-ups. Even if you could, that would just make you into the pusher instead of the push-e. And I think this is the core for people to remember when we're talking about this. If you want to make things better, you've got to flatten the relationships. Where is the friction arising from? Where is the friction, the opportunity for abuse arising from? You have to flatten the power differential, right, between party A and party B. Whether we're talking about an individual and their spouse, whether we're talking about a citizen and their government, right now the disparities are extreme. You have people who are not punished by law for extreme abuses of authority, whether these are happening individually within the home or whether we're talking about socially across the whole of a country. We have differing levels of accountability and we have differing levels of authority. The most exciting thing about the new rise of this sort of cryptocurrency space and all the tools that are arising from it and Web 3 is that we can take the lessons from the old traditional architecture that we inherited, whether we're talking about government, whether we're talking about finance, whether we're talking about violence, whether we're talking about surveillance, and we can apply them to a new space, and recognize that to make something truly safe, people have to not know that it's there. The owner understands it, and if they want to share it with someone, they can. But the public, right, the society, government, the bad boyfriend, they shouldn't even know it's there. We should have the $10 Nokia in the office.
Okay, so we're gonna do just because we have to close, unfortunately. Everyone who has questions, which are you three, will each say them to Snowden, and then Snowden will give his final comments, and if he has some ability or desire to address them, he'll try to maybe address. Okay, so
Yeah, I'll try to take some notes.
Yeah, Edward. So what's going to happen? I don't think you heard that.
I heard
we're going to have.
I heard it.
We only
I
have
heard
time
it.
for
I
one
heard
more. So there are going to be
I
three
heard it.
people who'll be asking you questions, and you pick whichever you want to answer.
Yeah.
Hi, Edward. Thanks for coming and talking to us today. So, oh, I can look in the camera. Great. Hi.
It's okay.
So
You don't have to. I can't see you.
I think myself, I look a lot to history to try to understand the moment we're at right now with privacy, anonymity, and security in relationship to the power, the powers that be in the people. So you think of like the Magna Carta. And I know for me as an American, I think about like the Constitution, where a group of individuals got together and created a document for a structure and a system that they believed would shield them and the people from tyranny. And I think, never mind, we're not going to debate that. We're in terms of the merit of like the Constitution, but the Constitution was made up of articles. What do you think are the new articles of data privacy, anonymity that support the good of society and the dignity of the individual, like as applications, right? Like a lot of us, I think, are application developers. So at the application layer, like Article 1 being communication, right? Article 2 maybe finance. So that's my question.
Just wait a second. Okay, two more questions.
Cool. Hey, Ed. Our protocol allows people to train deep learning models using high performance compute power in a censorship resistant way. Some people say deep learning models are like 3D printed guns. In other words, they're very dangerous for an individual to have access to and use of. Do you think the average person should be able to access high performance compute to train deep learning models?
Mm-hmm.
When you did what you did, you had to put your safety and identity on the line. In 2 days, Persony Labs will unveil a primitive called ZK email. It allows you to generate a zero-knowledge proof that an email was sent, only revealing the organization.
All right, you're gonna cut it. Cut it. It's not a question.
It's about the NSA because Snowden could have revealed what he revealed without revealing who he was.
One line question.
If there was a primitive that allowed you to reveal any information in an email without revealing who you were, it's possible no one would have known your identity. Who do you think could benefit most from this kind of technology?
Thanks so much.
Okay. I'll try to go through them. Yeah, I have them. I was taking notes. So one, I think the fastest to answer, I'll go through first, which is about the deep learning models, right? We see a lot of people stressing out about generative AI in like the art space. We see people talking about like voice learning. We've seen the things about deepfakes. I think all of this is ridiculous and overblown. We can't have a new clergy that has access to the gospel. And then the laymen who aren't allowed to read it and interpret it for themselves. They can't experience it for themselves. We need to democratize access to these technologies. And, everybody should be able to access deep learning. If you want to make a deep fake of anyone, anywhere, if you want to tell the AI to create an image of anything in any context, you should be able to do that. Why not? The idea that people are going to mislead, misinform, abuse these things is absolutely true. They absolutely will. And you know what we're going to learn about learn how to deal with it the same way we have with anything else. It is not more dangerous than what we already have, where we have corporate media institutions and state media institutions all around the world who are aggressively competing to see who can misinform and disinform to a greater degree and faster to advance their agenda. When we look to the question about the Constitution and sort of what is the new Constitution, unfortunately, I can't write you a new Constitution on the spot. What I would say is there's something incredibly powerful about that example, because if you look at the average age of people who are in the Constitution, it's something like 28, right? These were very young people in a fraught circumstance who really remade what government could be, at least in the context of their moment in history. It's not to say it's the end of history. It's not to say it's the best government, right? But they did something extraordinary when they were young, when they were under-resourced, simply because they had the daring, the gumption, and the intellectual capacity to do it. Second thing is, about these constitutional articles on data privacy and everything like that. The real value of it is they argued extensively and at length. They challenged each other's ideas. They did it publicly, and they did it anonymously or pseudonymously through like the article or the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers to see sort of who would win the arguments. And they understood what was on all sides, and then they voted, right? But again, the people who were in this weren't just, randos off the street. They were people who had skin in the game. There were people who were really risking prison or death in the sort of pursuit of their beliefs. And then we had sort of the advertisement at the end there. But the idea behind it, if I could have put this stuff on the internet and not revealed my identity, would it have made a difference? And not really. Look, I think the creation of these tools is good. It's valuable. I mean, it's neat that people can do these kind of things. But as a technology, as a technologist, we've been able to do these kind of things, not in a systemic way, for a very long time, with like hashes and pre-commitments, putting things out there, pseudonymous accounts. You can use like Tor and whatnot to get out there. The real problem when you're talking about this sort of thing is journalists aren't going to trust you without identity. Like, the proof is not enough. We've got Secure Drop right now that's in all of the major newsrooms in the world. And they have only now finally started to understand, like, people will send real things in there, but they get stuff every day that's like space aliens and pyramids, and it's not valuable. When I was writing to Laura Poitras, Barton Gellman, Glenn Greenwald, it was very difficult to get them to believe me, and they didn't know my identity until they were on the plane to actually meet with me. And that was simply because if they made a mistake, I would have gone to jail. It was too risky for them to know my identity at all. And that's why we had all the code names and whatnot at the time. But the idea here is it's not that we erase identity. It's that we return the power of identity to those who hold that identity. Just as I chose to withhold my identity for the larger part of the collaboration with journalists, but then eventually I established it to sort of get them over the border and establish my bona fides with them. It's the same thing for the internet in the future, right? People should be able to go to a friend after they said something, whatever, something got 10,000 likes. It can be banal. It can be meaningless. But to them, it has meaning. To their community, it has meaning. And they go, look, I did that. And they can prove that. That's valuable, right? But the world doesn't need to know that. Google shouldn't know that. And the government must not know that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And maybe
Good luck, everyone.
wave.
I think I was asked.
All
I don't
right,
know if you
thank
guys can
everyone.
still hear me.
Thank you, Snowden. Sorry, I think you're still trying to say something.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Go ahead.
Say goodbye. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys. So we're going to take a quick break for lunch right now, and then afterwards we'll come back and we'll dive deeper into all. 2 p.m.? Yeah, let's do it. 2 p.m., 30 minutes, eat fast.